Welcome to the LB's The Lover of Author Book Chats. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm so glad you made it. And if you come all the time, I appreciate you showing up one more time. I've had the honor to interview, I guess, over 65, close to 70 authors now, best-selling to debut authors, just like Elizabeth. And I also have a YouTube channel, which I hope you hit subscribe to. But what's there is all those videos that we've been doing online are now uploaded, and you can watch those recordings at any time that you like. And y'all, I'm getting so close, almost 18,000 hours watched. So it just is, yeah, I think everybody just loves listening to these authors. It's not me, it's the authors are so awesome. But if you have a chance, go watch some that you haven't, like them, comment. I know authors like seeing it, and so do I. But today we're here to introduce debut author Elizabeth DeLozier. She holds a BA in Spanish literature, a BS in biological anthropology, and a doctorate in physical therapy. Yes, I will be coming back to this because what a trio. She's an avid traveler, an animal lover, a history nerd, and she lives in Southern California with her husband, twin sons, and rescue dogs. So I know that we have a lot of commonality with amongst this group. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with all of you tonight.
Well, I think I don't normally start out this way, but since you're a debut author, I think I just want to give you the chance to give us your elevator pitch for this book. Now, I will tell you, we've all read it. If they haven't and they haven't finished, they know there's going to be spoilers. But I want to hear in your words how you promote this book.
Okay, I'm gonna do my best. It's been a minute since I dusted this speech off. So the year is 1347. We are in Avignon, in the current day south of France, in Provence, and the story follows Eleanor Blanchet, who is a young midwife and herbalist with remarkable skills, just like her mother before her. Eleanor wants more than anything to become legitimized in her pursuit of medicine, but of course, at the time, that's not open to females. But she meets the Pope's physician in a chance encounter in the woods, and they strike a deal. If she can cure the Pope of his mysterious illness, then Guy de Chauliac, the most famous physician in the world, will take her on as his apprentice. So that's the opener. And then if we were to go a little bit farther, of course, I would say just as Eleanor and Guigo are working together to enhance Eleanor's understanding of medicine, two pieces of news arrive. The first, a mysterious new disease has made landfall in Europe. As the Black Plague spreads, it kills between half and two-thirds of the population. And as Guigo and Eleanor race to find a cure and a treatment for the illness, more news arrives, which is that Queen Joanna of Naples and Sicily, who is famous for her beauty, is on her way to stand trial for her husband's murder, but she is pregnant and in need of a midwife, a role that only Eleanor can fill.
Okay. Again, I will keep saying this. This is the perfect Women History Month book. Like for me, it hits all those check boxes. And if somebody's looking for one, a recommendation, give this one, people, because I keep shouting it from the rooftops. But I need to clear something up. You start with a quote from Dante's Inferno for us. Please tell us why, because I was not expecting that on the first page. So love to hear it.
I think that quote sets the stage so beautifully for everything that is about to happen. It roots us in the time. And of course, Dante was from Florence, not from Avignon, but those two cities had so much in common at this moment in history. They were both sort of on the cusp of the very early Renaissance, right? And so Dante was the most famous. He was like the Taylor Swift of the Middle Ages, right? Like everybody had read Dante. And so if you were literate, you had come in contact with his works. And it was important to me because the path of the plague, wherever you were, was so hellish. But I wanted us to see Eleanor, that was coming for Eleanor and coming for the characters. And I also sort of wanted to set up some of the symbols that come from the Divine Comedy, like her mother's name is Beatrice, right? And Beatrice is Dante's love interest, is the woman for whom he goes down into hell, right? And I wanted those parallels to be set up early on, and then we end, of course, with a Dante quote too.
Yes, loved it all. Okay, I'm gonna go back even further though, because I told the group I was gonna ask this. Spanish lit, biological anthropology, and physical therapy. So, how did that combo get you to where you are as a novelist? And especially with this book in particular, because I don't think I've ever interviewed an author with this, array of degrees.
Random of a resume, right? Well, I would like to know the answer to that question too. I don't feel like I have like a, well, let me walk, break it down for you.
Yeah.
I'm really lucky that I grew up in a family who supported me wanting to study what I wanted to in college, even though I am not, a biological anthropologist nor a Spanish literature, I don't know, professor, right, today. So I feel really grateful that I was able to pursue both of those very disparate interests. I loved biological anthropology because I was always that girl with my nose in a book. Like I went to dinner a couple of days ago and there was this family there with this kind of awkward 12-year-old girl who was just reading in the corner the whole time. And I was like, poked my husband and I was like, that was me for sure. So I always loved to read. And when I got to college, I found in the pages of like Garcia Marquez and Isabel Allende and these magical realists who interwove these magic, right? Interwove magic into such mundane pieces of life that it felt brand new. I'd never experienced anything like that before, other than, reading some like fantasy when I was little, and I hadn't felt swept away in a story that had that kind of depth before. And so I really fell in love with that. And then biological anthropology is fascinating. It's the story of human evolution. And it was the one of the, the greatest story ever told. It was really, really cool to be able to delve into kind of both sides of my brain. And then I got closer to graduation and I realized there's nothing you can do with either of those degrees. And I was taking a dance class at the time and I hurt myself and I went and saw a physical therapist on campus. And the way that he just sort of like knew exactly what was wrong with me and fixed it and was like, all right, you should be good. If you don't come back, goodbye. It was so interesting to me because it was a different sort of medicine than anything I'd been exposed to before. It felt much more holistic and there weren't any paper sheets and there weren't any beeping machines. It was this very like tangible piece of medicine. And so I started researching, how do I get into physical therapy school? And started, took a year to do all of my prerequisites. And then I found pelvic floor physical therapy, which is the kind of physical therapy that I still practice. So I work primarily with women, although I do treat men and children as well. And I work within the OBGYN department of the hospital here in San Diego. And so my coworkers, my, office mates are midwives and physician's assistants and OBGYNs. And I work with a lot of women during, before, and after pregnancy. So I feel very connected to my women's health hat. And I think that comes through, obviously, in Eleanor, this idea of women helping women through the scariest thing of all time, right? And that until very recently, and still in many places, is the most dangerous thing that they'll ever do, which is bear children. And up until very recently, men were the ones outside of the room, right? Women were the ones working with each other to pull new life into the world. And so I wanted to, I don't think it was a conscious choice, but that's what you get with Eleanor.
Well, I think first of all, I got chill bumps when you started talking about your love of the literature, when you talked about that magical realism. And I am seeing a magical thread going through your life because, I mean, that's what started your love, or maybe not started, but really introduced you to more work and something you hadn't experienced. And then you go into also the scientific, I mean, with the anthropology, really are looking, and then to physical therapy, like what you said with what Eleanor is doing. It all just fit perfectly into this novel. I mean, who would have thought that mix all those up and we would end up with Eleanor? But I love that you had a different path, and I think it probably gave us the book that you gave us because of that. So all
Thank
right.
you. Yeah, I think so too. And just another piece of weird magic. And Laura, Beth, and I talked about this before you all chopped on, but my mother and aunt are twins. And after we sold the book, I got pregnant with twins, just like Eleanor and Margot. Isn't that so weird?
Yes, I love it. And I just, okay, so were they the inspiration, the twins, for this novel?
My mom and aunt.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, I think of course, to a certain extent. The idea that I had for this book, and I never thought I always loved to read, but I never thought I would be a writer. It wasn't ever something that I had seen in my cards. And in 2018, my mother and aunt, who, like Margot and Eleanor, are identical twins, the three of us went to the south of France on a trip. And I was reading John Kelly's amazing nonfiction narrative of the Black Plague, which is called The Great Mortality. And when I got to the point in Avignon, we were in Avignon because what he does in this book is he breaks down the plague city by city through Europe. And it was so eerie to be in that place. And if any of you have visited Avignon, it's one of those cities where you're walking past a Zara and a Monoprix, and then you turn the corner and it feels like you have gone back in time. It is these golden streets that are worn, down by centuries and centuries of feet, and there are these canals, and especially when the sun goes down and all the tourists go back, it is eerie. And so I was reading this book about the Black Plague, and I could imagine, Guy de Chauliac's bonfires, and I could imagine the stacks of corpses on the side of the road. And then my mom and aunt and I were walking through the city. So I think that's where really the seed of this book was planted.
Well, I can imagine it. I was just on an airplane when I was reading this book, and there was an elderly gentleman behind me hacking, and I would jump every time because I'm like, oh my gosh. Mike's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I'm reading a book on the plague. He's like, calm down. It was so I can only imagine the atmospheric, you know, feeling I would have if I were in the town itself. So I think it's great that you went there and were able to translate it into this novel. So you're reading the book about the plague, you're in Avignon. So when did you decide I'm gonna write this book and this is why?
I didn't have the eureka moment about the book until the next year. And I was on my honeymoon in the bathtub, and it just like dropped into my head. It was the weirdest thing. And I know other people I know who are writers say that sometimes similar things have happened to them, but it was like I had the names, I had Eleanor and Margot. I saw them like clear as day. I saw not all, of course, all of the, nitty-gritty of the plot, but like the overall arc.
Mhm.
And I got out of the bathtub and I said to my brand new husband, like, get me a piece of paper and a pen. And he was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I just need to write this down. And I just started sort of scribbling and writing down all the ideas that I had as they came. That was in August of 2019. And then I got back to the States. We honeymooned in Europe. I got back to the States. I started researching, drafting, outlining. I started writing in earnest. And then our own pandemic hit. And so I was already pretty deep in this project by March of 2020. But as a healthcare worker, it was so strange to be so deep in this research and having spent, all of my free time in the Middle Ages with this other pandemic, and then to be foisted. And again, I'm a physical therapist. I was seeing patients, with my huge shield and all my masks and my gloves and everything, and getting my temperature checked at the door and all of that. But I wasn't a frontline worker. I wasn't, taking out the trash or any of that stuff. Like there were people who were doing a much more serious job than I was. But it was still so strange to be in a small room with a patient all day and then to come home, and like, change clothes in my car, all the weird stuff that we were all doing before we really understood what this was. But to see the parallels between the novel that I was working on and this time frame that I was researching and our own reality.
How do you think the novel was shaped because of your experience and that duality that sort of those timelines are almost coming together?
I hope that that fear and like deep loneliness that we all experienced in different ways during the pandemic, I hope that that comes through in Eleanor's story and Eleanor's experience in a way that rings true for all of you. I think that it really colored I think it would have been really hard to write this book. I think it would have been a more hollow book if we hadn't also been going through our own pandemic. and that fear and anxiety and uncertainty didn't flavor a lot of the text.
Well, tell your husband thank you for getting paper and pen and getting this started on your honeymoon because I mean, that's really cool. Okay, I know you're a medical professional with, physical therapy, but this is a different type of medicine. So like and a lot of just it's full, that's chock full. So how did you go about researching this to make sure you were in a good place to be able to explain what Eleanor was doing and the other physicians around?
Well, there were a lot of texts that the male physicians at the time were using. Like, I reference a lot the treatise that Guigo ended up writing, and that was continued to be used as a medical textbook until the 1800s in many places. So we have a lot of the material that the physicians were going on. We don't have a lot of what the women were doing. We don't really know what the herbalists were doing, right?
Right.
But this traditional herbal medicine has been passed down for such a long time, and it felt safe to assume that a lot of the things that are used now or in the, historical past that we have reference for would also have been used in the 13th century or 14th century as long as they were endemic to Provence. So I took some creative liberty for sure. But a lot of the medication there are some texts from the 13th century and the 12th century from the UK and other parts of Britain that have some really weird medicines in them. And so I sort of cherry picked ingredients and sort of made it up in that way. As far as the bubo excision process, Guigo did write fairly extensively about that. So I felt like I had a good backbone to go off of on that. And then for the cadaver dissection in physical therapy school, we spend a year with a human cadaver. So a lot of the gross details of that are from my own experience.
Oh, well, for that, let's start with the herbalist. Did you try any of these or do you use any of these now? Because I find this stuff fascinating. And I'm kind of like, oh, do I want to try that one?
I'm a Western medicine girly through and through. So I feel like I'm sure that they are helpful, right? I'm sure that is an effect from some of these things, right? Like we know that with kidney stones, cranberry, something as acidic as cranberry juice, which didn't exist in Europe at the time, but something as acidic as cranberry juice is actually a really effective treatment in a lot of cases. So there are those things. I personally am like, give me the good stuff, give me the made up stuff, give me the synthetics.
Well, the other thing I really liked, and I was just wondering if this quote was somewhere, but when they talked about the physician's task is not to heal the sick, but to stand between the living and the dead, armed with nothing but books and a little knowledge. Was that something that you saw somewhere else, or is that just from you? Because I thought that was a beautiful quote.
Oh, thank you so much. That's trademark Elizabeth DeLozier.
Hey, take it, run with it. I loved it. Another thing that came up, and I think this also goes with the herbalist, is that when you mentioned that God gives us exactly what we need right here on our natural earth. And that was sort of a theme that went throughout because that was how she ended up meeting the Pope's physician, was because she was out there looking, and getting the last of the berries. Um, how did you decide to handle that theme throughout?
I it was very important to me that religion and that a belief in an almighty or any like let's just call it a spirituality. It was important to me that the spirituality wasn't the enemy. It was the men who had corrupted the power of the spirituality, right? And so to me, um I feel very connected to the natural world, and through that, I feel very connected to something bigger. I'm not a, particularly religious person, but I am quite spiritual. And I wanted I wanted to lift up and celebrate this idea of like the natural world being something that we should protect and learn from, and that feminine connection to the natural world. I mean, we as women are the reason that all of us are here, right? Like we have this power in our bodies to create life. It's amazing. And it would make sense to me that that power is, bothersome, worrisome to, especially to these men in power who are not connected to the power in their own bodies the way that women are. And so that was, I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it, but I think you all kind of understand what I'm trying to say here is that her mother understood the natural world and used the power of the natural world, harnessed that to help people. And Eleanor is doing the same thing, but that's a power that doesn't translate to this hierarchical masculine power structure that was the Catholic, a lot of the Catholic Church at the time, and of course our bad guy.
Yeah. Uh, I loved that. I mean, I didn't love it. It was very sad that she lost her mother, but it also put her in a situation to have to deal with so many things on her own and the insecurities that we see coming through her. But yet there is a little bit of magical realism throughout. And I wonder if that was from your Spanish literature background, because the part with the dog and the communication and the the mother, how she could feel certain things, and then it came back later that she also did. So did you intentionally, or was that just from your own love of lit?
I don't think I consciously said, this is I want this to have some magical realism in it. Those are the stories that I gravitate towards and that I feel that I enjoy reading. I also wanted to walk the line because I didn't want there to be, I'm not a fantasy girly, right? Like I didn't want to really have it be witchcraft. I didn't want to have to explain, that's just not my toolkit. So I wanted her to feel, I wanted there to be many symbols that kept coming back, and I wanted you as the reader to feel like the magic was in things that we have all maybe experienced, whether it's kind of coincidences or a connection to a place or a connection to a person. I wanted it to feel more realistic. So yeah, I guess I was just like, no, definitely not. And then I was like, yeah, I think that's right.
Well, the reason why I asked it then was because you mentioned, that women are tied to the earth and the power of that, and then that's what sort of comes through your magical realism, right? It really grounds, at the beginning, it really grounds her with trust of this wild animal, and the love that they share. It's I just thought it was a great way to give us that, those sort of goosebumps right away, and then it can continue, right? It sort of sets a stage, and then we're ready for it. Okay, another question I have is, Eleanor wants the power to possess something that can't be taken away from her. And that's her medical knowledge, right? And her medical practice. And I know you also have that through your physical therapy, but I'm also curious if that's what it's like writing a novel. Like, you now have something that no one can take away from you. You have this book, right? You've written your first book. Do you feel a little connected to that, just like when you
Mm,
were writing her?
That's such a good, that's such a good question. I feel very deeply enmeshed with Eleanor just because she and I went through so much together.
You
You know,
went through a plague now.
exactly. We went through the whole plague. I agree with you. I think it's interesting because I'm at this moment in my life, and I was telling Laura about this before you all hopped on too, where I am a mom of very small humans. Sorry, my dog is drinking water. uh,
Here.
I am a mother of twin 16-month-old boys. So like if you've ever met a 16-month-old boy, imagine two of them. That's like most of my life, most of my life is like pulling Cheerios out of my hair and like covered in yogurt. And that's great. And then I go to work and I'm a physical therapist. And then I have this sort of like secret piece of myself that I get to, enjoy with you all and experience with you all. And sometimes I get to go out in the world and like put on my author hat, but it does feel like this thing, especially with motherhood. It's an amazing experience. I'm so grateful to have been able to do it, but it's hard to remember who you are, and so much of you just has to kind of float away for you to get through the day. And I feel very grateful that this was published and that I have this piece of myself that's out in the world that's with all of you to kind of ground me in who I am and who I will continue to be outside of, the screaming babies and the dirty diapers.
Well, it's a beautiful novel. I tell people all the time, I can't believe that this is a debut. And so I'm hoping this is not going to be your one and only. Was this just one passion? Or are you hoping to be able to continue your writing beyond?
I am certainly I'm working on my second novel. It is slated for publication next summer, I think August 26th or something like that.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a different vibe. It takes place in Victorian London during the reign of Jack the Ripper. So another just like lighthearted, super
Beach read. It's a beach read. Yeah.
beach read, exactly. But it's fun and it's a little bit more magical than this novel. But I'm still trying to really ground it in reality. So that's yeah, I love that. I love being able to do that. I wake up really early and I spend an hour and a half before my boys wake up, and that's my time.
Okay.
And I'm very grateful to have that piece of myself.
Well, we've only been talking for 30 minutes, but I would expect nothing less than a fun Jack the Ripper story coming up from a Spanish lit biological anthropologist, physical therapist. So, you know what? I think that's great that you actually have no boundaries. Just go for it because I'm gonna love it. Like I'm just gonna love it. You're fantastic.
Zero boundaries. That's good. That's they're gonna put that on my headstone.
Okay, let's keep moving on because I have lots to. We've already talked about the twin thing, but I wanted to find out because I know you said it sort of just dropped to you in the bathtub. Um, so what was your process? Because you didn't immediately, get going on it. So how did you get there to say, okay, now I'm going to start writing?
I started drafting a little bit, and right, it turns out writing a novel is really hard. I don't know if anybody's ever said that to you before, but it's really hard and it takes forever. And I think I'm a better writer now than I was when I started Eleanor, certainly. And I'm a better, like, not just like line writer, but I am thinking in a much more logical way than I was when I wrote this book. This book went through so many changes. I can't tell you how many entire plot lines, entire characters came and went. And so when I first started writing it, I was writing it as an escape. It was fun. It was like something to do with my brain that was not doom scrolling the news and and seeing patients. It was something different. Some people baked sourdough bread. I did that too, but I also wrote this book. And so for a while, it was just sort of like this thing that I was doing. And then as it started taking shape, I started thinking, maybe I can actually do something with this. So I wrote a draft of it and edited it and then started sending it out to agents. Um, but I guess I would say I wrote sort of all over the place. And then it took a lot of effort and many, many edits to pull it into a cohesive story. Especially because it's such a long period of time, right? It takes place over a year. So, and because it's historical fiction, one of the things that I think is a great entry point to writing historical fiction is the fact that you have scaffolding, right? You're like, okay, the plague came at this time. This is when it was in Genoa. This is when Queen Joanna came. And so you have these spots that you have to hit with the plot. So in some ways, it's like a little bit of a cheat code, but then you have to hit all those points with the plot and they have to like correspond to what your protagonist is going through. So it's very challenging. And that's what I'm running into with this next novel too, is like you have these dates that you want to stay as close to as possible. And also you have to figure out a way to tell a really compelling story.
How I just feel like it's so challenging doing the historical fiction piece because if I feel like there are so many people that are just like waiting to find out, like, oh, is there a mistake? Like, did you have to change things to make this story fit? Or, I mean, I know you said you had to take some liberties, but I'm just curious because I can't imagine like someone constantly looking over my shoulder to say, like, no, that's not right. It's just,
I try really hard not to think about that. Like obviously we all have access to the internet, which is great because I can Google, like train routes 1888 and like it's amazing. It was that also, by the way, if you're going to write a historical novel, don't go any earlier than like the Victorian era because you have all the information at your fingertips. This was a lot harder. I think I want to break that into a couple of buckets.
okay.
So first of all, it is a double-edged sword because you want to be as close as possible to reality and you want your readers to know that they're in good hands, right? And I
Mhm.
think we've all opened books where we know right away that the author did her homework or his homework, and you feel like there are all of these details that are very clear that I did not know before, and they
Right.
feel true. And there are also other versions of that where they feel very explainy, like I think Margaret Atwood talks about historical fiction. She's like, if you're writing about a period of time and you have to like explain everything, it's like if somebody walked into your house and you're like, there was a thing on the counter that was used to toast bread. They called it a toaster. Like you've lost your
Oh,
audience, right?
yeah.
So that's a challenge for sure, finding ways to just immerse you as the reader into the world without you constantly going, what is she talking about? Or explaining everything. So what I've started doing now, instead of pausing anytime I hit a roadblock and going down a research rabbit hole, is I'll just put an asterisk and I'll come back to it when I have a little bit of time, and I'll, do a deep dive of like, what bonnet would she wear to church? Like I don't have time to look this up right now. I'll come back later because I'm in the zone and I'm just going to keep working. So those are some things. As far as big plot points, an example that I think of a lot with this novel is the some reviewers have rightly pointed out that the third act, the last bit of the book, has a lot of things happen at once, which is totally true. My editor, when we were starting to work through a big, edit of this novel, said, I think we should just have Guido de Chauliac go with Pope Clement to the place where he goes to wait out the plague. She's like, that gets him out of the way, then we don't have to do the surgery for him. Like there's way too much going on. But Guy de Chauliac famously stayed in Avignon and treated patients and got the plague himself. So I was absolutely unwilling to bend on that, even though it does make the last act a little bit congested. It was really important to me that we stay true to the facts for that. So you absolutely have to pick and choose what you want, what works for the story, and
Mhm.
what is true. And that's a balancing act that I think every author has to come to by themselves.
Now we came with that comment, we sort of came back to this concept that you brought up with Dante's Inferno. Like now we have acts. So can you talk about when that sort of came to fruition for you and when you decided this is how I'm going to plot this out for the reader and why?
Yes, I remember when I was like plotting it out, I remember I wrote like Act Two, Plague, and then just like underlined it a bunch, and then was like Act Three, So, sort of traditionally, there's this inciting incident. Eleanor meets Father Loop, or she meets Guy de Chauliac in the woods, and she makes a choice that spurs her into Act Two, which is, I want to be this person's physician. I'm going to make this happen. And then Act Two is basically just like the plot is working with Eleanor to raise the stakes and raise the stakes. And those both have to be internal and external, right? So she's worried for her life. Her sister is going to marry Eric. This is a moment where she can make a change in her life, right? And then the Black Plague is coming. So that's like Act Two. And then Act Three is the resolution. And so this book has a lot of Act Two because that is, where the meat of the story is. And I really wanted you to feel like the plague was real in a way that didn't feel overwhelming, so that you didn't want to read any further because everybody's dying terrible deaths. Like that's not a fun read. But it had to have the plague and Joanna and Margot and all of these other plot points that were just playing off of each other to raise the temperature. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And I love that you framed it around that with the acts because I did feel like there was that progression. And it wasn't too, I mean, obviously death is a lot, but I did feel like you did stay true to it, but it wasn't drowning me. Like I could keep up with Eleanor because she was a hopeful light that, she wanted to basically get in between life and death for these people, which is it was phenomenal. And this brings me to another point, female empowerment, because you brought up about the sisters, the twins, and one is about to get married and one has no prospects at all, nor does she want to have prospects. And I'm just curious because, she feels like marriage, Eleanor feels like marriage is a cage. But yet her sister is very more traditional and she believes that that is safety. And so can you just talk about the difference and why you wanted to bring that up for Eleanor?
Definitely. I mean, again, until very recently, women didn't have a ton of choice in what their lives looked like, right? And marriage was uh, a contract, a socioeconomic contract, right? And so this idea that at a time when women had almost no agency, I wanted Eleanor to be a break from that. And of course, she ends up at the end of the book, there's a love interest, but that's not what this book is about. It's not about Eleanor finding a man, right? It's about Eleanor finding herself. And it's about Eleanor stepping into the role that she was born to occupy. And Margot does that too.
Yeah.
Margot goes through an arc as well where she has this very narrow view of what her life can be. And that's not bad. A lot of us have that. A lot of us have that. And she thought it was love. She thought it was going to be a great life for her, and it might have been, right? Like we see very clearly that she yearns to be a mother, and she yearns to be a wife, and she yearns to have her own household, and like those are things that are important to Margot, which are legitimate desires. So I didn't want her to just be like a completely flat, like I just can't wait to get married character. But I did want to show that that is an ideal for what a woman's life can look like. And Eleanor wanted something completely different, which is why the target was on her back from the beginning. And then of course things don't work out for Margot, even though she was the one with like the safe plan.
Right.
That didn't work out for
Well,
her. So much
you
is
throw the
outside of her
plague
control.
in, no one's safe. Queen or peasant or, anybody. It's just like you just no one's safe with that. But then you also talk about, and this is a great quote where you say, Queen or peasant, we are women living in a world of men. And I thought that was such a great point to say that, because even though you have this queen coming into town, she still has to go by certain rules. Maybe not the same rules as everybody else, but it's still a man's world. And I wanted to know why you wanted to throw that portion into the story as well. I mean, I know it with the midwife, but there was already so much happening anyway. So why that little gem?
I when I was reading John Kelly's The Great Mortality, he does talk about Queen Joanna coming to Avignon during the plague, which I thought like, oh my God, you couldn't write, like if this was a plot in Game of Thrones, we'd all be rolling our eyes. Like, this is crazy. She's super pregnant, everybody's got the plague. Like, what? But I just thought that was such an amazing visual of her walking down the street, to go to her trial for her husband's murder, which she like definitely was involved in, right? But for the plot itself, I wanted Eleanor to have a few foils to play off of, right? And so Joanna is this glamorous, she's so beautiful, she's so famous, she's so prickly. And I wanted to show that she has this heart, the soft, kind heart, right? And we see glimpses of that. We see that with her becoming a mother again, and we see how much and by all accounts, she really loved being a mother, even though none of her children survived childhood. I wanted to show how hard it was to be a woman in several different pieces of society, right? So we've got Eleanor, who is going against the grain and fighting to the death for what she believes in. We've got Margot, who is following the path, the straight and narrow path, and still everything falls apart for her. And then we've got Queen Joanna, who is holding on to her power with like a slipping grip, right? And if you read the author's note, when they go back to Naples, her husband, Luigi, takes over. He kills all of her advisors. He like does a coup and takes over the government. All of her children die, and eventually the Hungarians kill her. Like, she had a really tragic life. And so I wanted to show that even like this pinnacle, right? This woman who's so famously beautiful and so powerful is still has the rug pulled out from her under her all the time.
We have these beautiful glimpses of life and motherhood, but then yet we also see what it almost starts out when we find out that Eleanor's mother has passed away. And I'm going to quote this because I love your lyrical style. So I normally don't do this, but I am. And suddenly I remember my mother is dead. It sweeps through me like a winter mistral and blows out all the candles I have lit against it. For me, that really set the tone from the beginning because we know how important her mother is to her and how much she's tried to guard herself against it. And yet it comes right back. And so I get those chill bumps. And I feel like that also is part of that Spanish literature background that you have.
You're
Like
probably right.
it felt so, I mean, I could feel like a cold wind coming through when I read that. And it solidified their relationship, I think was what I needed in that moment so that you understand how passionate she is about her profession and about the people around her that she's trying to help. So I had to give that quote. Sorry, y'all. I'm like reading to y'all. Y'all are, I just loved it. And then the other phrase that I wanted to go through with you is "you are myself." That came up quite a bit. Tell us a little bit about that and why you chose to use it and keep it throughout the novel.
Thank you for bringing up these quotes to me. It's so kind. It's such a weird feeling. It's such a wonderful feeling when like you read the book. It still just blows my mind. Like I'm like, oh my God, she read the book. Uh, I thank you for saying that about the quote about her mother. Sometimes we as writers write a sentence and we're like, oh, that was such a good one. And that was one of my favorite ones for the book. I was really happy with how that turned out. As far as the "you are myself," many of these things just kind of pop up. And I feel like it's almost like when your kid does something amazing, you're like proud of it, but it doesn't feel like you did it. That's what it feels like when I'm writing, is like, what a cool thing, but I don't feel like I own it. You know what I mean? So the "you are myself," it just sort of just Margot said it. I don't know what else to say. Like I didn't say it, Margot said it. And reflecting on it, I have twins. My mom and aunt are twins, and they came from a very challenging relationship. Like their parents, their dad was in World War II. There's just like a lot of trauma in their childhood. And they were kind of constantly trying to separate from each other and create their own identities. And my boys are not there yet, but I'm sure that they will be, where you are genetically the same. I mean, that's kind of a magical thing, right? There's like something magical about twins where you come from the same egg, but you're different people. And so I think my mother and aunt were sort of always trying to distance themselves and show the world around them and themselves and their parents that they are not one person, they are two people. And I wanted those moments of Margot and Eleanor coming together to be this mirror moment where even though they're super different, you see that they're the same person. And so I wanted that to be their like anchor point. They drift off and they do totally different things and then they come together and they recognize each other.
All right, y'all be thinking of your questions. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. Are you ready, Elizabeth?
I think
Okay.
so.
City or countryside?
Countryside.
Arizona or California?
Oh, don't make me pick between my home state and my current state. Right now, California.
Okay. Your favorite French city?
I think I have to say Avignon.
Do you have a favorite French dish to eat?
I mean, a croissant,
We'll just
any
leave it at
pastry,
that because
literally any pastry.
if you could travel anywhere, where would it be?
At the moment, I'd like to be in the Scottish Highlands.
Ooh, nice.
Mm.
Do you prefer to travel to lots of different places, or do you like to go back to one you absolutely love?
I've done both, and I'm in a moment in my life where I like to go back to the same city.
And if you could go back in time, when and where, and it could be with Jack the Ripper, I'm not quite sure.
No, 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 no. Hard pass, not Jack the Ripper. Oh my gosh, how about Renaissance Venice?
Oh, nice. Okay. And then what woman do you truly look up to since we are celebrating Women's History Month?
Oh my God, so many. I have so many amazing, strong women in my life. My mother and aunt, obviously. I have some amazing friends. I think Andy Adams might be on this. Andy, if you're there, you're one of them. I have a lot of really amazing girlfriends who show me how to do it and hold it all together and make dinner and go to jobs and take care of their families. And we're all amazing. Happy Women's History Month, everybody.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to open up. Great job on the rapid fire questions. I'm going to open it up to readers. If y'all have a question, please raise your hand or you can ask in the chat box. And if you are not wanting to, that's totally fine too. And I can continue because y'all, I have so many questions. Like I'm having to edit myself. While we're waiting though, this cover is absolutely beautiful. Was this always the title and the first cover, or were there many iterations?
This was always the title, even
Okay.
when it was just a Word doc on my computer. It was always Eleanore of Avignon. The cover, I think it's amazing. So we talked a lot about it, about different options, and they gave me three, which is pretty standard, right? One was a woman's hand picking like a flower, and it was beautiful.
Mhm.
Another was a woman kind of glimpsed through leaves, but it had sort of a YA vibe to it a little bit. She was very pretty, but she had like this huge lips. I was like, I don't know, I don't think that's what we're looking for. Um, so when my mother and and aunt and I went to Avignon, when you go across the river, there's that abbey on the hill that she talks about. And it's still there. It's amazing. And you can visit. And we did. And I took a picture of the city of Avignon across the river from that viewpoint.
Uh-huh.
And I sent them that. And that's what they turned.
Well, this is your actual photo?
No, I mean,
Oh,
I don't think so. I don't think it was
okay. I was
my
like,
phone.
what? Add that to your resume.
Photographer. No. No, but it's like it's exact same viewpoint. And they asked me if I had any ideas for the cover, and I sent them that picture.
Oh,
So if you are on Instagram and you go to my Instagram, I have the picture that I took
okay.
posted. But that it's really cool that I'm not a visual artist. I think they did an amazing job.
It really is a great cover. Naomi has a question here. What's the one thing that you didn't put in this book that you wish you had, or maybe that you had to hit the cutting floor? She loved it and read it in a day and a half. I think we all just really flew through this one.
Thank you, Naomi. That's so kind. Oh man. Let me think for a second. There were some more scenes that were like a little bit more filler. There were more scenes with the dog. And I think if I could go back and do one thing, I might add a little bit more of Baudouin into the book because he's a character that I love so much. And it was important to me that he showed up at certain points. So we knew that basically like the spirit of her mother was with her, right? Like I felt like he was a guardian sent by her to take care of Eleanor. So I wanted him to show up at certain points and I wanted him to be mysterious enough that we had a sort of a magical feeling about him. But I do wish I had like one more scene with him in it.
Wow, he was great. Lynette, I'm going to go ahead and get you to ask a question. Go ahead.
Hi, Elizabeth. I love this book. It's really everything I love. I love historical fiction, especially this time period. But I have a couple of questions. How difficult was it to sell this book? Because it seems like it's very specific genre, taking place in the Middle Ages. And the title, was there ever a thought to name it something else? Because it seemed like kind of a memoir of like an old timey thing. I love the title, but I would think that would have made it harder too. And my last question is, do you have an independent bookstore where we could buy a copy of it signed by you?
Ooh.
Amazing. I'll go with the last question first. At the
Okay.
moment, I don't know if there are any copies, but the book Catapult in South Park, which is my local, like half a mile away from me, and I can put it in the chat. They have copies, and I would be happy to go in and sign one for you.
Okay.
I believe that Warwick's, which is a store in La Jolla here in San Diego, they picked this book for their book club this year, and I think I'm going to go sign some copies. So they might have some too. Are you
Okay.
on Instagram?
I am.
Okay, add me on Instagram and then I'll post about that, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Of course, I'm happy to do it. Thank you so much for your support. Second question was, I forgot it already. What were the other two? I'm so
The first one was how difficult was it to sell the book, and then about the title.
the title. Okay. Yeah, so I wrote Eleanor of Avignon and I thought it was just sort of a working title. And then when Dutton bought it, they were like, we're happy with the title. We're ready to, post on Publishers Marketplace that we bought it. They were ready to do that. So it didn't change. I really thought it was going to. The funny thing is that line where she's talking to she's talking to Joanna, and Joanna calls her Eleanor of Avignon. That wasn't in the book until a pretty late draft, like after we'd already sold the book and we're working through developmental edits. But it just made sense to me because I was like, it's kind of a random title unless we sort of tie it back to Eleanor of Aquitaine, which is, who maybe some of us have heard of. So I'm glad that that thread got woven sort of back in towards the end of the editing process. But yeah, they liked the title, which was fine. As far as selling it goes, it was a challenge because a lot of places, a lot of publishers have a lot of numbers correlated to like World War II, World War I, Civil War, what's the Regency, all of those, Victorian, they sell really well, right? We know how they sell, but the Middle Ages, we haven't seen a ton of, it feels really distant or it did to publishers. So we got a lot of letters back, me and my agent, saying like, we thought this was great. We don't know how to sell it. When we first sent it to Dutton, so I query you query agents, you send whatever 5 pages to a bunch of agents and you say, please, please, please take me. And they all say no, or they don't get back to you for like 6 or 8 months, right? When I finally signed with my agent, who's amazing, we sent it to Dutton, and this woman at Dutton was like, I really like it. I don't think it's there yet. And so we waited until we'd heard back from that whole thing of editors, all of whom said, thank you, but no. And then we did a big edit with this woman's feedback. And then we sent it to her and said, what do you think? And that's when she bought it.
Oh, great question, Lynette. Thank you so much. All right. I also want to ask, because this was an aardvark book. It was chosen by this new book club kit. So what was that experience like? And how did you find out?
As an author, there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes that like is complete, like I know nothing about. So like, for example, I was like peeing in a cup for one of my pregnancy appointments, and I got it, my phone dinged, and it was my agent. She was like, hey, the Lithuanians want to buy the rights. And I was like, we're selling, what is happening? Like, I didn't even know that this was a part of the like they don't give you a book on like what it's going to be like. So there were so many surprises along the way. So as far as the Aardvark Book Club, I just got an email from my editor who was like, hey, Aardvark wants to buy the book.
You're
We're
like,
gonna say, and the publisher has book club rights. So I didn't have to sign anything. I didn't have to say yes or no. They were
okay,
just like, we're selling them to Aardvark,
awesome.
which was great. They were
Yeah, it is
amazing.
great. I mean, it really opens it up to more readers that might not have seen your book before. So I'm glad that it got that exposure. What are some other books that you would suggest that this group read that just stand behind?
Such a good question. And I wrote them down because Laura Beth warned me that this would be a
This
question.
is y'all. This is the one question. I don't never told y'all this. This is the only question I tell authors I'm going to ask because I know we all forget names and book titles. You know
Ard
that story about
Aardvark asked me the same question. I was like talking about parenting books, like looking back, I was like, why am I talking about parenting? Like, this is such a stupid answer. Okay. I loved The Bass Rock by Evie Wild. That's WYLD. It's really wonderful. It takes place in, I believe, Scotland, and it's sort of 3 timelines, and there's a witchy undertone and there's a historical undertone, and it all ties together really well. I loved that book. Oh, Caledonia by Elspeth Barker. It's a very narrow little book. Maggie O'Farrell says it's like her favorite book of all time.
ooh,
And
that's a compliment too.
that's a good compliment, right? If Maggie O'Farrell said that to me, I would die. It's great. It's really, really slender, and it also takes place in Scotland. Clearly, I've got something going on with Scotland. But it's sort of like Anne of Green Gables, but gothic and funny and sad and weird, but it's amazing. And The Great Mortality, which is that book that I called out several times. It's a narrative nonfiction about the Black Plague that goes city by city through Europe. And it's such I don't want to say it's a fun read because that's kind of gross, but it's such a fun read. It's like, it's really good.
I think I like your sense of humor because, fun Jack the Ripper, and I think maybe there is something more because you mentioned you wanted to go to the Highlands, right? So I think that may be something you need to do a little research on and take a trip maybe for the next novel.
That's right. I'll write it off.
Can you tell us any more about I know I kind of asked you a little bit early, but the Jack the Ripper book, is it still so quiet that you can't, or is there anything you can hook us with?
I think I can tell you about it. I don't know. Nobody's told me I shouldn't talk about it. So I'm just going to talk about it. I'm going to beg for forgiveness if there's a problem. So it's set in 1888 during the reign of Jack the Ripper, and it follows this young woman whose name is Carolyn Foster, and she goes to London to try to find her estranged brother who she hasn't heard from for a while. Her father dies. She's left penniless. She's like 19. And she shows up at the last place her brother was known to be, which was a men's boarding house in Whitechapel, which is, where all the murders were happening. And she gets there and she knocks on the door and he's not there. So she tells them that she is interested in the maid position. There's a sign on the window that says maid wanted. And she says, I've got nothing. Please let me be the maid. And they bring her in. And she quickly realizes that there's something sinister going on that's both about the boarding house and her brother's disappearance and the murders. It's called the Whitechapel Full Moon Society.
Ooh, that's the title. Ooh, I like it. I like it. And you said that'll be summer 2026?
Yes,
Okay.
August 2026.
And where is it in the process? Because I know it takes such a long time for the book to happen. So where is it in that timeline?
We are, yeah, this is an interesting one too, because I pitched it to the editor at Dutton, like it's called on spec. So I just basically wrote like a 2-page synopsis, and they bought that, which is amazing. And also when we signed the paperwork, I was like, oh shit, now I have to write this book. Like the last time, like the book was already written, now I have to write the book. So I'm about halfway done with a second draft of it.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably by June we'll have most of what the book is going to be, and then we'll spend the summer streamlining.
Okay. Well, good luck. I hope that you have very productive hour and a half before your twins wake up, and that you get that writing in and you get to maintain your sanity with your writing. But it's been a phenomenal night, y'all. I love highlighting debut authors, and you are one of the best. So thank you so much. I can't wait to read what you have coming out next. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, all your readers out there, for joining. Please make sure you check out her Instagram. She said she's gonna let us know about those signed books. So check her out there. I'm also on Facebook, LB the Lover of Books, and on Bookstagram as well. And then you can find about reviews, recommendations, and of course, more author chats. In 1 week, though, on March 31st, we're going to chat with Geneva Rose. It's a little bit different. This is for her book, The Perfect Marriage. Y'all, this book is nearing 1 million ratings on Goodreads. So it was published back in 2020, but it has had a run. And this is to get us ready for her new book and follow up, The Perfect Divorce, which is coming out mid-April. If you know of an author that you would like to chat with, let me know. I'll see what I can do. But again, I have that. I haven't even told you about this. I have a broadcast channel on Instagram, and that's where I put all my author chat information. It's just straight author chat information. So if you want that, please join. But Elizabeth, thank you for helping us remind us that to treasure the mundane life that's flashing before our eyes, that everything is strung together, that we are never alone, because this earth is calling. We can see that there is still beauty and grace in the world, and that it's worth fighting for. I stand by this. It's the perfect women's history book. Read and just keep on writing and own it. Own it, own it, own it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure to talk to all of you. Thank you all so much for your support.
Definitely. We'll keep supporting, keep us posted on what's coming. Good night, everybody.
Good night.